that depends on what the defense or the prosecution thinks is best in terms of reaching the end goal that they want. But that's what we have. Probable cause. We're continuing moving forward. We're again joined with Lara. Lara, it's kind of what you said. This is what you anticipated. You had the magic ball. You knew it was going to happen. So talk to us about the next steps. Your client is found to have probable cause. They're going to be detained. What are some of the next steps that we can expect in this case?
Well, I mean, we already know what the next step is. They already discussed it on the record, and that's a motion for change of venue. And I expect the motion for change of venue from the defense, not necessarily from the prosecution. My guess is that the prosecution would like to keep it where it is because they want a jury that's been listening to all this, following it closely, saturated with all this information, and just immersed in every way possible in this case and invested in this case. And those are going to be the jurors who are going to most likely vote guilty because of all the coverage and all the interest in the case. And the gruesome reality of the way the bodies were found, okay, and where they were found and the condition they were found. Now, so the defense clearly is going to want a change of venue, and I can already anticipate that they're not going to want it within the district because that's not far enough. You want to go as far away from where the heavy coverage on this case and interest in this case was. So my educated guess would be that they would want it to be outside of the district, again, as far away as possible from Chad Daybell's home and the location of these alleged crimes. That's definitely one thing. I can already see at some point maybe the prosecution will try to combine the two, and I'm guessing that the two cases, Lori's and Chad Daybell's, but I am guessing that that's going to be happening more likely when and if murder charges are filed. And at that point, I could already see that the defense would rather have a motion to sever. It's definitely in the defendant's interest to have separate trials and to point fingers at one another. I can already see Lori pointing fingers at Chad, saying he's, the doomsday hero. He's the one who's been talking about all this, the one who brainwashed us, this, that, and basically turn against him and make him out as the mastermind and not knowing what had happened, not being in agreement, thinking that her kids were in a safe place, not necessarily murdered. So it could go. I could see them both pointing fingers at one another. The other thing is, usually what's seen as coming next, assuming that the next step is the arraignment and the information is filed, and then they appear for arraignment in district court. There's going to be a motion to dismiss, saying that the defense counsel can make the same arguments that he made today and some more in written paperwork, basically saying there wasn't enough evidence in this case, not sufficient evidence for probable cause, and for a second judge to look at, again, the evidence based on the transcript and decide whether there was probable cause. And so they'll have, I'm assuming, a second shot, at least that's how it is in California, a second shot at a dismissal. After that, there's the usual, the discovery, the continuation of the investigation. In this case, what we're all waiting, and we know is inevitable, is the murder charges.
Yeah, and that's going to be the interesting one, to see how or when that shoe finally drops and to see how it does, because like you said, those murder charges are going to be huge. I think at this point in time, there's a pretty good argument for severance based on the fact that there's, like you were kind of pointing out, an antagonistic defense, which is just like the bread and butter for separating a trial. But if you want to get them together in the same trial, which I think would be more advantageous to the prosecutor, as you were outlining, that murder charge is really what's going to connect the two of them, just because if you can say they murdered together, it's a lot harder to separate if you're saying they might have concealed separately. I think for Chad Daybell, what do you think? I think for Chad Daybell, this case can kind of rise or fall based on severance. Like if he doesn't sever, do you think that the case gets that much more difficult for Chad Daybell?
I agree. I think it's going to be a lot more difficult if the cases are not severed. I mean, it's a little harder to point fingers at one another within the same trial. And also all this damning evidence, especially if you're sitting next to and you're being tried with whoever you are saying is the main culprit or the mastermind, it's just they kind of rub off against you, and it doesn't really help. The jury will just package it all together and see everybody saying, "Let everybody go down. This was horrific," and basically let's find everybody guilty. Even though Alex isn't here, somebody's got to take some responsibility. Somebody's going to have to go down for these crimes. And just because, both sides are pointing fingers at Alex, or Chad Daybell is pointing fingers at his wife and Alex, we're not buying it. And it really could backfire on Chad Daybell. Chad Daybell, definitely, I agree with you, 100%, much better off being on his own, separate trial.
Yeah, when it comes to severances, for some reason, my grandfather's always words comes up to me. He used to say, crows and doves don't fly together, because the dove often gets shot with the crow, and he was a farmer, so he can kind of understand where he was going with that. And if Chad wants to be the dove, he's got to definitely separate. Will it happen? We're not sure. But we'll be back with more of the Law and Crime Trial Network after this break.